Each year, I rank my favorite matches of the year, and I have been sticking to a top 15 format the past few years because there's so many great matches. 10 is too few, but I feel like 20 would be cheating to include that many. So 15 feels like a good compromise to me. And then I rank them right down to what I feel was the best match that I saw all year. And I saw a lot of great ones this year. From WWE, AEW, New Japan, even Impact. Shout out to Luke, who hooked me up with a list of great matches from Impact this year, some of which I had already seen, many of which I had not. Last year on my list, the top spot went to the Young Bucks and the Lucha Brothers for their incredible cage match that they had it all out. It was the first time I had a tag team match in the number one spot in 5 years. So will history repeat itself again? Let's find out. This is my list. And that's the key words there, my list. My list is probably going to look different than your list. This is my list of the 15 best matches of 2022, ranked from number 15, we'll start from the bottom, all the way up to what I thought was the best match of the year. Now, I want to start with some honorable mentions. None of those Impact matches that I watched made my list, but the hour-long match between Josh Alexander and Speedball Mike Bailey from the December 8th episode of Impact was very good. Alexander has a storyline going right now with Bully Ray. He had an open challenge. He wanted Bully to accept, but he didn't. Mike Bailey took the match instead, and they went out there completely unexpected for an hour, and they went to war. And it's been great hearing about all these great matches that Mike Bailey has been having, and I've seen some of them, but probably not as many as I should, but after being banned from the U.S. for 5 years, right? I think the whole thing was he tried to get into the country. There was a work visa issue. They banned him. He couldn't work in the U.S. for 5 years, and he was a huge, name that was on the rise back then. And so now he's back, and he is just going balls to the wall with all these great matches. But it's crazy to me that on CageMatch.net, this match ranked as the second best match in Impact history, behind only the Unbreakable 3-Way from 2005 with AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, and Christopher Daniels. I don't know if I'd go that far. It was very good, but I was also bored during parts of it, and that crowd absolutely sucked. I know there weren't that many people in the building to begin with, but it sounded like an empty arena match watching this. So that did not help. The match between Jon Moxley and Wheeler Yuta from the April 8th episode of AEW Rampage also gets a mention. Maybe the best match in Rampage history. Certainly one of the best matches in Rampage history. I remember hearing great things about it from the taping that week. Then I watched it when it aired, and it exceeded my expectations. I love the story they told. Yuta had already been beaten by Moxley twice before, but he wanted his respect. Yuta, he bled buckets. He kept kicking out of everything Moxley threw at him. He lost again in the end, but Bryan Danielson and William Regal, they came to the ring after. Regal shook his hand, and he was officially christened as, the newest member of the Blackpool Combat Club. I thought that night when it was over that this was the night that Yuta went from some guy to a guy on that roster. And he has not had a breakout match like that since. He's had some very good ones with Daniel Garcia, but he's not had a breakout match like that since. But it was still one of my favorite AEW matches all year. The IWGP women's title match from the New Japan Stardom crossover show last month between Kairi and Mayu Iwatani, that was also very good. Not top 15 worthy for me, but it deserves an honorable mention. As does the AEW Women's Championship match from Wednesday's Holiday Bash episode of Dynamite between Jamie Hayter and Hikaru Shida. They gave those women the main event spot, and they killed it. And I struggled with this. I tried very hard to squeeze this match into my top 15 because I had fun watching it. It was that great. I don't know if it's the recency bias or what, but I thought that was one of the best AEW matches all year. And one of the best women's matches in the history of that company. But I just could not find a spot for it. I could not bump off any of my other 15 matches, so it just fell a little bit short. So let's begin with number 15. Becky Lynch against Bianca Belair for the Raw Women's Championship at WrestleMania 38. It was this or the hater match in this spot. And this one just edged it out for me. You know, the best matches bell to bell at this year's WrestleMania both came on night one, on Saturday. And it's the flip of a coin, which was the better of the two. I went with this one over Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. This was the culmination of the story that started with Becky taking the title from Bianca at SummerSlam last year in 26 seconds. Back then, it was the SmackDown Women's title, before Becky and Charlotte had their ill-fated belt swap. By the time this was over, Bianca's eye, I mean, she was looking like Sloth from the Goonies. She got kicked in the eye by Becky. But they had a great match with a great finish, and Bianca getting her revenge. Number 14 is a match that will be talked about for years to come, and highlights of this match will be shown when he wins the WWE Championship next year. It is Cody Rhodes with a torn pectoral muscle against Seth Rollins inside Hell in a Cell from the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view on June 5th. Hopefully the last Hell in a Cell pay-per-view they ever do. This was the third match in their trilogy this year. After Cody left AEW, he returned to WWE in what would have been the most shocking story of the year. Or second most, I guess, after the Brawl Out stuff. Any other year, it would have been the number 1 or 2 story of the year. Any other year but this one. But all three matches were very good, but this is the one that people are going to remember the most. I will never forget the hush that fell over that crowd when Cody took his jacket off and he revealed all the bruising on his chest and under his arm. I mean, it went around to the back of his arm. And that was all blood that was pooling under the skin. This was uncomfortable to watch, as was watching Rollins jamming a kendo stick repeatedly into Cody's pec. They allowed him to work the match because he couldn't make the injury any worse, but that doesn't mean it felt too good to be out there wrestling with it. He also realized, I think, what happened here. Cody had to realize that this was his big moment. He did not want to let down Vince McMahon for trusting him in a main event spot on pay-per-view. He was on the poster. They built the show. The entire show was built around him and Seth Rollins. And he did not want to let them down. This was the night that Cody Rhodes became a made man in WWE. I mean, yes, he set himself on fire in AEW. But this was unlike anything that we have ever seen, and with a surprising finish to boot, given that they had to know that Cody would be gone for a long time, he was going to have surgery, to put him over Seth Rollins for a third straight time, knowing that he was going to be gone for months, that was a surprise. But now when he comes back at the Royal Rumble, he's still undefeated, and he can get the big heroic return like Triple H did in 2002. You know, I could not put together a match of the year list and not include this somewhere on my list. This was as gutsy a performance as you will ever see. Stupid? Yeah, probably that too. But he gave the performance of a lifetime here. Number 13 is the dog collar match from AEW Revolution on March 6th between CM Punk and MJF, which was also the best match on that entire pay-per-view. When CM Punk first signed with AEW, the one name I could not wait to see him programmed with was MJF. I also wanted to see him back in the ring with Bryan Danielson, but sadly we never got to see it, and now we never will. But the idea of the promos between Punk and MJF was like catnip for wrestling fans. And it did not disappoint. Tony Khan went to it quicker than I thought he would. Hindsight being what it is, thank God he did. This was their second match. Their first match was almost as great as this one. That was from the Groundhog Day episode of Dynamite in Chicago. I give this one the slight edge, but that one was fantastic too. We got a Pepsi plunge from Punk in that match, probably the first one he's done since his Ring of Honor run. Punk suffered his first defeat in AEW in that match. The 3 commercial breaks took that one down a few notches for me, but such is the nature of live TV. We didn't have that problem here though. I loved Punk coming out in his old ROH gear to Miseria Cantare. The people didn't react to that music in Orlando the way that I think they would have if they were in Chicago or New York. I don't think they fully appreciated that entrance, but I did. I thought it was great. The match was slow, it was methodical for a while, but it was violent. It was bloody. I thought they told a great story. And when things got tough for MJF, he called on his insurance policy. Wardlow. to come on down, help him out of a jam, as he has many times before, give him the Dynamite Diamond ring. By this point, the people were just waiting for the explosion to happen. They were ready for Wardlow to break away from MJF and break out on his own. Wardlow, he kind of pretended, he couldn't find where the ring was. He's checking his pockets until Punk regained control. And then all of a sudden, Wardlow, he found the ring. And the camera shot of him staring at Punk and Punk staring back at him and Wardlow calmly setting the ring down on the mat for Punk to use was so great. Wardlow already had a TNT title match in his back pocket. He did not need MJF anymore. He did not need to take this man's shit any longer. And it's CM Punk clobbering MJF with the Dynamite Diamond ring, as MJF has done many times before to his opponents. Poetic justice for Punk to win the match that way. They tore each other to shreds. But the biggest reaction was for the spot with Wardlow. And it is very frustrating how much Tony Khan has cooled off Wardlow since then. It felt like he was on the cusp of breaking out in a big way, and it just hasn't happened yet. I don't even blame Wardlow for that. But they could not have told this story any better than they did here. And the idea that I floated before all of this was that MJF would win their first match, which he did. Punk would win the rematch, which he did. Punk would then go on to win the AEW World title, which he did. And then it pays off with MJF eventually winning his first world championship by beating CM Punk to complete the story arc between them. And that's exactly how it would have played out had Punk not gotten hurt again and then torpedoed the whole thing. This story never got its rightful conclusion, and that sucks. This next match is one that I never thought would make this list, because since their first match in 2015, which was great, the matches that these two have had have largely sucked and have been very disappointing, like their WrestleMania match was this year. WWE then announced one last match between them at SummerSlam. They promised us that this would be the end. It remains to be seen if they'll hold true to their word. And if it is, they went out on a high note. Number 12 is the last man standing match from SummerSlam between Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. This was the first ever last man standing match in SummerSlam history and the 9th SummerSlam main event for Brock Lesnar, more than any other man in history. This was one of the craziest matches that I have ever seen, and I could appreciate them trying something different instead of doing the same old shit that they did in all their other matches. We had Farmer Brock driving a tractor down to the ring, jumping off the thing to get things started. Brock Lesnar is scary enough. Flying Brock Lesnar, though. It's like the first time I learned that water bugs could fly. Water bugs are scary enough without knowing that they can fly. Once I saw that they could get airborne, that was all the nightmare fuel that I needed. Life would never be the same. Because we get a lot of those around here. Brock may as well have been a flying water bug. Then we got one of the greatest visuals in wrestling history, with Brock using the front end loader on the tractor to lift up the corner of the ring a good 10 feet into the air, which sent Roman Reigns rolling out of the ring to the floor outside. We had Paul Heyman taking an F5 through the announce table. Austin Theory tried to cash in his Money in the Bank briefcase. He got laid out by an F5, though. But in the end, it was all the members of the Bloodline burying Lesnar under a mountain of furniture so that he couldn't get back to his feet by the 10 count that won it for Roman Reigns and ended one of the greatest spectacles that I've ever seen. This was the best match that these two have had since WrestleMania 31. And when it was over, it was just fun. I had fun watching this. I watch wrestling to have fun and to enjoy myself. And that's what I did watching this. Which brings me to number 11. I had a lot of fun watching this. Will Ospreay, one-on-one with Orange Cassidy for the IWGP United States Championship at the AEW New Japan Forbidden Door show. For all the great talent on that card, these two went out and they stole the show. There are still plenty of people who hate Orange Cassidy with a passion. They hate him with the passion of 1,000 burning suns. And they will never like him. They will never give him his just due as a worker just because of the gimmick. But he shut a lot of people up with his performance in this match. He should have shut those people up before with the match he had with Pac a couple of years ago, or the three-way with Pac and Omega back during the pandemic, but some people just can't look past the pocket stuff. And I will say, Cassidy would not have been my first choice as an opponent for Will Ospreay. If you're trying to do a dream match type scenario, AEW against New Japan, Orange Cassidy would not have been my first choice to put up against Will Ospreay, but Kenny Omega was not ready yet to come back. Pac was already booked for the All-Atlantic 4-Way. Andrade at one point claimed that he was supposed to wrestle Ospreay until politics got in the way with him doing, work with AAA. All of those would have been great matches, but I had no complaints when this was over. Ospreay is a cocky prick, so him having to put up with Cassidy's, shenanigans, that was fun to watch. It was a contrast in characters. Some great reversals, great near falls. The last, I'd say, 7 or 8 minutes in particular were just tremendous. But Ospreay pulls it out in the end, and then after the match is over, we had the surprise cameo from Katsuyori Shibata taking out Ospreay in Aussie Open, with Orange Cassidy giving his sunglasses to Shibata to wear. I don't know that Orange Cassidy will ever have a better match than this, but Will Ospreay will. And he did. Many times, in fact, this year. We're not even into the top 10 yet. So let's get there now. The top 10 matches of the year. Number 10 was Kazuchika Okada against Shingo Takagi for the IWGP World Heavyweight title from Wrestle Kingdom 16, Night 1 at the Tokyo Dome. It would be easy to forget about this because it was the first big show of the year. And there have been so many great matches since then. But when it comes to these Wrestle Kingdom main events, one does not forget so easily. This was a rematch from the Dominion show last year where Shingo beat Okada to win the vacant title. Okada had to win the G1 to get back to the Tokyo Dome main event. And Okada was wearing Antonio Inoki-inspired gear. It was the 50th anniversary this year of the company that Inoki founded. This was before he passed away. And you had to know that for the 50th year, they would go back to their tried and true. They would go back to Okada as their guy, especially at a time with COVID just wreaking havoc on their business, a time when they needed that shot in the arm. He wins with a single Rainmaker. This was the first match of the year candidate for 2022, and it barely hangs on to the top 10, but it does make the cut on my list. Number 9 is a match I was not expecting to steal the show on a card as stacked as the one that night in Chicago, but that's exactly what these 4 men went out there and did. It was the Acclaimed against Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland for the AEW Tag Team Championship at All Out on September 4th. This was the night that made the Acclaimed. They didn't win the titles on this night, but this was their coming out party. This was where they kind of staked their claim that, hey, we're the real deal here. They were already over with the fans, but this crowd put their stamp of approval on them. It's like Anthony Bowen says every time they come out, the Acclaimed have arrived. They arrived at All Out. Lee and Swerve were also baby faces coming into... Swerve was acting heelish, but they were still baby faces at this point. Whenever they were in control, though, the crowd booed. It was made very clear very fast that the fans in Chicago wanted to see a title change. And it looked like they were going to get one. There was more than one miscommunication between Lee and Swerve during the match. They had been teasing a possible rift between them for weeks leading up to this. Each time the Acclaim would try to capitalize and the building sounded like it was ready to explode. But then there would be a last-minute kick out or a shoulder up. Max Caster, he got Keith Lee up on his shoulders for an attitude adjustment. And Keith Lee is no small man. Just ask Rick Ross. Then he hit the mic drop on Swerve, had the match won. Lee barely broke it up at the last second. In the end, Lee and Swerve hit their Doomsday Device double stomp combo. They pinned Anthony Bowens to retain the titles. And you could feel the air get sucked right out of the crowd. There was a lot of debate over that finish. Should Tony Khan have called an audible and put the titles on the Acclaimed here? I think he made the right call, as I said at the time, by holding off on it until the Grand Slam show in New York a few weeks later. They were at Arthur Ashe Stadium. This was the match that validated them. Now they could go into an even bigger building in New York City and win the titles there, which is what they did. And that was good too, but that was not as good as this match. And it could not match the excitement of this. This match was a revelation in how good it ended up being. I was not expecting that. Number 8 is going to be a polarizing choice, especially for the anti-AEW crowd, but it is some of the most fun that I have had all year watching wrestling. And it was anything but a traditional wrestling match. It was Anarchy in the Arena, with the Jericho Appreciation Society against Bryan Danielson, Jon Moxley, Eddie Kingston, Santana, and Ortiz from AEW Double or Nothing on May 29th. Out of this, we got a 7-month feud between the JAS and the Blackpool Combat Club, which was at least 3 months longer than it needed to be. But this is one of the most entertaining street fights that I have ever seen in pro wrestling. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. The first words out of the mouth of Justin Roberts when he was doing the ring introductions was, "The shit's about to hit the fan." And he was not lying. Jericho and his crew, they came to the ring, they were dressed in all white. By the end of this, they were red. There were a lot of people who were red when this thing was over. They met the baby faces in the crowd to start. They kept Moxley's music playing for the first 5 minutes of the match. It's like a bar fight scene in a movie. This was pure chaos. Tony Schiavone said that this was Memphis Tupelo stuff, which I thought was a great comparison. It made me think of the old Tupelo concession stand brawl from 1979, only crazier with a lot more people involved in a much bigger building. But I said in my review, it also reminded me of those hardcore matches the Nasty Boys had in WCW against Cactus Jack and Max Payne and against Public Enemy. Moxley loosened the top rope at one point. He took it off. And I panicked because that meant the show, it was already like 20 after 11. And I'm looking at the clock because these shows are fucking long. So he's taking the rope off and there's still 2 matches left. I go, oh no, it's going to make the show even longer. But while that was going on, you had Daniel Garcia and Eddie Kingston. They were off fighting inside of an elevator. In another part of the building, Santana and Ortiz, they dove off ladders through tables that had Matt Menard and Angelo Parker laid out across them. Later on, we had the sight of zombie Eddie Kingston walking. He looked like a zombie out of The Walking Dead, walking to the ring with a can of gasoline after Jericho had previously burned him with a fireball. He was going to burn them all. He poured gasoline all over Jericho and Bryan Danielson. I think Danielson had him in the label lock, so he's getting gas on Danielson. Danielson stops him before he could light the match and says, "What the hell are you doing?" Jericho locked on a single leg crab, while Jake Hager choked out Danielson with the loose ring rope. And that gave the win to the Jericho Appreciation Society when he passed out. This was a live-action version of Stadium Stampede. And it was even better than Stadium Stampede was. And as late as it was, again, I was starting to fade. This is the match that got me back into things. This woke me right up. I could not look away from what I was seeing. And in a company that goes overboard with the use of blood and weapons, they tried something different here involving all of that stuff, and it worked. And that's why I have that as number 8. Number 7 is Will Ospreay against Shingo Takagi from day 12 of this year's G1 Climax on August 6th in Osaka. Ospreay against Shingo in the finals of the Best of the Super Juniors was my match of the year in 2019. They had that honor locked up in June that year, and they never let it go. Last year, they did it again. At Wrestling Dontaku, I had that as my number 5 match of the year. That was a match that Kevin Kelly called the best wrestling match that he has ever called. And think of the ground that covers with all of the New Japan matches that Kevin Kelly has been on the call for. So it is no surprise that they would end up back here on this list again. These two just have a special chemistry when they get in the ring together. This year, I have them at number 7. So they're working their way down the list, but they're still in the top 10. The story coming in was that Ospreay had beaten Shingo before, but never in less than 30 minutes. And this match had a 30-minute time limit. And I think that only made the match better. It never felt overly long. It was tightened up from some of their other matches. It went about 20 minutes with Shingo picking up the win this time. I could watch these two wrestle once a year for the next 10 years and never get bored of it. I've had the chance to call a Will Ospreay match in House of Glory. I've had the opportunity to call a Shingo Takagi match, the one he had with Low Ki in House of Glory a few months ago. Maybe one of these days I'll get to call one between the two of them. That would be fun. Number 6 is one of the best matches in Dynamite history, pitting Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler against Matt and Nick Jackson. It's FTR versus the Young Bucks Part 2. From the April 6th episode of AEW Dynamite, this was winner take all for the Ring of Honor and AAA Tag Team titles. This was the rematch 18 months in the making. The Bucks won that first match to win their first AEW Tag Team titles off of FTR. Less than a week before this match, FTR beat the Briscoes to win the Ring of Honor Tag Team titles, and then they came in here and did this. 2 Match of the Year candidates in the span of 5 days. As good as their first match was, this one was so much better. For one, they had more than 1,000 fans there live to see it, which is all they were allowed at Full Gear 2 years ago at Daly's Place for obvious reasons. So they didn't have a big crowd. And this time, FTR were the babyfaces and the Bucks came in as the heels, and that dynamic worked so much better. They did a false finish spot where the Bucks got the 3 count, but Rick Knox missed Cash Wheeler's foot on the bottom rope because, of course, it's Rick fucking Knox. So he restarted the match. FTR set up for the Bucks' own BTE trigger to Matt Jackson, who spat in Dax's face. They pulled the trigger, and then they hit the big rig for the win. It was a clean finish right in the middle. The Bucks wanted to put them over clean since FTR did the same for them in their first match. What I also loved about this is that we did not have the usual over-reliance on super kicks or flips from the Young Bucks that we see in pretty much every single Young Bucks match. This was a toned-down version of the Young Bucks, and I think that made this match even better. But the crowd really made this feel like a big event. 4 years ago this month, the month before AEW was officially formed, Matt Jackson tweeted, "One day we'll wrestle the Revival and everyone will rejoice. Remember this tweet." I love their first match, especially the fact that if you remember their first match at Full Gear, it was a flip that ended up doing in the team that always says no flips, just fists. But this is the match that made me think of that tweet. And what it could be like with a building full of people going nuts for these two teams. That's what we got on Dynamite back in April. So now we are into the top 5. My fave 5, as Booker T would say. Number 5 is another one of the best matches in Dynamite history. And, say what you want to about the ratings or the lack of focus that Dynamite has had, for a while this year. Last few weeks have been better. But there have been more bangers on that show this year than on Raw or SmackDown. And SmackDown has had some good ones. But some of the matches on Dynamite this year blow away anything that we've seen on Raw and SmackDown, including this one. This was Bryan Danielson against Hangman Adam Page for the AEW World Championship. This was the rematch on the very first Dynamite of the new year, the January 5th episode. This was a violent sequel to their 1-hour draw on last year's Winter is Coming episode. This time, if the match were to go to a draw, it would have gone to the judges, which were Paul White, Mark Henry, and Jerry Lynn. They were all sitting at ringside, but it did not have to go to the judges. Hangman was a bloody mess. Danielson did not want to be left out, so he ended up bleeding too. Remember, he told Vince McMahon that was one of the reasons he wanted to leave WWE. He wanted to bleed. Well, he got his wish. Almost 30 minutes in, Danielson stuffed a dead-eye attempt. He hit him with a Gotch-style pile driver, covered him, only got 2. Hangman hit a backdrop driver right on Danielson's head. Set up for the buckshot lariat, which connected. He turned Danielson inside out. And finally, Hangman Page hands Bryan Danielson his very first loss since coming to AEW. They somehow managed to top their last match. I like this more than I did their 60-minute match, and I love their 60-minute match. I had that as my 4th best match of 2021. Danielson did everything he could to try to take that buckshot lariat away from Hangman Page. He was working over the shoulder, but in the end, he fell victim to it. He put over one of AEW's big homegrown, I say homegrown, yes, I know, he was in Ring of Honor and New Japan, I know. But Hangman Page is not a WWE guy. he did not get to be a main eventer working somewhere else. Tony Khan turned Hangman Page, at least for a while there, into a main event talent. He cut his teeth really in AEW. And to see that type of star, a homegrown AEW star, be put over in this way by this former WrestleMania headliner, because, Danielson's already a made guy, he put Page and his finish over in the strongest possible way. And in doing so, he handed Hangman the 2 best matches of his career. These two and that tag team match from Revolution 2 years ago, where it was Page and Omega against the Bucks, you will not find 3 better Hangman Page matches than those. This is the kind of match I wanted out of Bryan Danielson when he signed with AEW. This was excellent. Number 4 takes us back to the Tokyo Dome for the second night of Wrestle Kingdom on January 5th. That was the same day as the Danielson-Hangman match I just talked about, 1 spot earlier. This was a great day to be a wrestling fan. Fuck Rusev Day. We had January 5th, 2022. Much as the match with Okada and Shingo the night before on January 4th, this was for the IWGP World Heavyweight title. Okada pulled out not 1, but 2 4.5-star matches out of his ass in the span of 24 hours. This was the better of the 2 main events. Okada retains with the Rainmaker, and this was Okada one-on-one with Will Ospreay, and this wasn't even the best match that these two would have this year. They would go on to have an even better match together. We may as well go straight into it. Number 3 on the list, which is occupied by these same 2 men, Okada and Ospreay, in the finals of this year's G1 Climax on August 18th. I had predicted an Okada-Ospreay final in this year's G1, with Okada winning the entire thing, and that's exactly what happened. It was the 50th anniversary for New Japan. It was Okada's 10th anniversary since coming back from excursion. I figured this was going to be his year. This was Okada's 2nd straight G1 win, his 4th overall. They went 34 minutes, just shy of the all-time G1 record. The story was Ospreay throwing everything he could at Okada to try to beat him cleanly for the first time, including moves from past Okada opponents. It's like the ghost of Christmas past for Okada. He used Tanahashi's high fly flow. He used the Styles Clash. He used Omega's V-trigger. He tried for the one-winged angel. But it still wasn't enough. And it sucks that the fans were not allowed to do anything but clap their little hands off for these two is what they did. The 2 best wrestlers on the planet right now, as far as I'm concerned, Will Ospreay and Kazuchika Okada. And Ospreay still cannot beat Okada clean. I think his 1 victory was off a distraction. I think it'll pay off for him one day at the Tokyo Dome, where he will finally get that big, elusive, clean win over Okada. But for now, his bad luck continues. So that was number 3. Then we get to number 2. I originally had this in the number 1 spot, but it got bumped down to number 2, which is not a bad place to be. And it was the best WWE match all year. From Clash at the Castle in Cardiff on September 3rd, Gunther against Sheamus for the Intercontinental Championship. I love that for the first time I can rank an Intercontinental title match this high up on my list. It was the best IC title match in years. And appropriate that in a year where we celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Bret Hart British Bulldog match at Wembley Stadium, right? One of the best Intercontinental, if not the best Intercontinental title match of all time, some might say. That we had Bret Hart in the crowd live to watch the best Intercontinental title match in the last 20 plus years. It's also the highest ranking that I have ever given to a match involving Sheamus, which is very cool to see the kind of career renaissance that he had this year at 44 years old, 13 years after he made his main roster debut. This was his best match in years, and to see Walter be the one to restore some prestige back to a title that I saw so many great matches for as a kid. The Intercontinental title means something again. Just the fact that it was even defended on a major show is an achievement, because before this, it had not been defended on a pay-per-view since last year's WrestleMania. This is a match I was looking forward to ever since Walter got called up to the main roster. 2 guys that hit hard, and they beat the holy hell out of each other. with 60,000 people cheering hard to see Sheamus win his first Intercontinental title, which has eluded him his entire career. Walter would chop him, Sheamus would give it right back. The near falls were great, including a Celtic cross by Sheamus, the old Razor's Edge, but Gunther kicked out. There was a power bomb by Gunther, but after that, the camera work here was great. They zoomed in on Sheamus's face. He's shaking his head like, no, you're going to have to kill me to beat me. They zoomed in on Gunther's face. He was yelling. He was frustrated that he couldn't put this man away. And then the lariat followed. And finally, he was able to put down Sheamus. This was 20 minutes bell to bell of just greatness. And that doesn't even include the post-match after Imperium left and went to the back. Sheamus, he used the ropes to get back to his feet. His chest was just shredded and all bloodied. And this crowd gave him a standing ovation. For the first time in his career, Sheamus got a standing ovation. This was a fight to the finish. I cannot say enough good things about this. This right here is the WWE match of the year. And if that is the best WWE match of 2022, then the top spot belongs to the best trilogy of matches. And really, the best trilogy in wrestling since Omega and Okada. For the second straight year, tag team wrestling takes the number one spot on my countdown. Last year, it was the Lucha Bros and the Young Bucks in the cage at All Out. This year, the top spot belongs to FTR and the Briscoes. Top guys and dem boys. I'm lumping all three of their matches together because it's hard to rank them, and frankly, I didn't want them taking up 3 spots when it was hard enough to keep this list of 15 as it is. So, am I cheating a little bit? Yes, but I don't give a shit. It's my list. Fuck off. We're putting all 3 matches together here in the number 1 spot. All 3 matches were contested for the Ring of Honor Tag Team Championship. First at Supercard of Honor back on April 1st, then at Death Before Dishonor on July 23rd, and their most recent match, the Double Dog Collar match at Final Battle on December 10th. What is amazing to me about all 3 of these matches being the best that I saw all year, because we talk so often about how it's important to build these matches up, right? What's the build like? What's the build going to be like this year for WrestleMania, right? You don't want to come in cold. We talk about that all the time, and I think it's a fair point to make. What's amazing about this is they did these 3 matches with absolutely no build on television whatsoever. There were some social media promos. That was it. There was no build on TV. Ring of Honor has no television show. Tony Khan wanted to have the Briscoes on AEW television, but Warner Brothers Discovery would not allow it because of a dumb tweet that Jay Briscoe posted in 2013. So there wasn't much build for any of these matches. In fact, the last one was just thrown together a few days before the show on Dynamite by Billy Gunn's kids, because the Briscoes were not allowed to be there themselves. So it was almost like Austin and Colton Gunn were the surrogates to basically announce the match or throw it to a Briscoes promo, or not a Briscoes promo, but to throw it to the announcement that this match was added to the Final Battle card. Now, I would say their second match was slightly better than their first, and their third was probably the best of all 3, but they're all great in their own way. After their first match, I said it would be in the conversation for Match of the Year when this year was over. That was the night that Dax and Cash won the ROH Tag Team titles. Then came the second match, Best 2 out of 3 Falls, a 45-minute classic that saw FTR retain their titles. And then the Dog Collar match, which was a violent, bloody, brutal match. This was not a dance. This was a dangerous match to be in. This felt like a fight. And it saw the Briscoes finally regain the titles. They had to win. Tony Khan could not have the Briscoes drop 3 straight when they are exclusive to Ring of Honor. If FTR beats them in a clean sweep, they're still AEW guys. At the end of the day, they'll be on TBS and TNT most weeks. The Briscoes won't. So they had to win, and they did. Dave Meltzer called this the greatest chain match that he has ever seen. I can't think of one better. And that includes CM Punk and MJF, who had one this year that made this same list, which is another first. I don't think I've ever had a Match of the Year list with 1 dog collar match on it, let alone 2. But this is a trilogy that will be talked about for years. Tag team wrestling at its finest. And that is your top 15 Match of the Year list for 2022, the 15 best matches that I saw all year.